Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of Origin, quarter videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the Thursday edition of my bi-weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only live stream Crafting Icewind Dale, in which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Rime of the Frostmaiden. If you are playing characters of Robin, Frey, Celeste, or Edmund or Thimbleweed, this is not meant for you, but for the rest of you. Welcome. It will be full of spoilers. We stream our sessions live on YouTube every Friday evening. Watch all of our D&D sessions and reviews here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Rogue Watson and join our official Discord server. Invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to new patrons this week, Jammin' Clams. For our campaign, we use Roll20.net, and for streaming, I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. And we are talking some more about the final dragon battle that we will hopefully get to this session tomorrow. And I'm really leaning more and more towards the fact, you know, when we first started talking about this chapter, it was all about having Bryn Shander be the final stand, but the way I'm actually gonna talk about the events and kind of update the players, there's actually a really good chance they're gonna instead want to go to Targos to meet it head on, which would be pretty much their best option all the way through, because they would save a lot more lives and they'd be able to, I guess the only thing they would be is they'd be a little more under the gun, which would be more fun for me drama wise, because then I could have them arrive in Targos at the same time as the dragon, and then it's a race to like do all the things that they need to do, which is just, you know, finding the speaker and unleashing the avatar, versus having more kind of downtime to prepare in Bryn Shander, because we already had basically a whole session of doing that, and I feel like we kind of had fun doing that, but now we don't necessarily need to do that for this session. And I would like to hopefully leave myself as much session as possible for the actual dragon fight, because something I've learned is that a lot of these big, you know, marquee boss fights tend to take up a full session. You know, the Zardarok one, the Umber Hulk fight pretty much lasted a whole session, and so and unfortunately we didn't make it all the way to the fight. It's not like we're starting the fight this session. We actually have some, you know, role-playing stuff we need to do to get there. So my biggest fear for this session is that you know, it ends up being an hour in or later before we actually even start the dragon fight. So I'm torn between, you know, having a lot of cool stuff happen and having the players do things and just kind of skipping them ahead. And I'm hoping I can maybe take advantage of using some cutscenes to kind of get them, you know, moving past, like, you know, the arrival in Targos and all that kind of stuff, versus trying to balance that with railroading a little too much to the spot that I want them to be at. By the way, welcome to dark mode of Roll20. This is just recently added this week, obviously since between Monday and today, because it was not here when we did the crafting on Monday. They have added dark mode support to Roll20. Now, usually I'm overjoyed about dark mode, and I switch to it immediately and never look back. This one, I'm still getting used to it. It's really tripping me up. I mean, I've been using Roll20 for whatever it's been now, 6 or 7 years or something, and this is very different for me. And, you know, all the windows have the black background, the little toolbars, obviously the windows, and now it like kind of highlights the tab you're on. It's trippy. The only thing that really bugs me is if you notice the hyperlinks are like have this weird background highlight that feels like it's an error, because not all of them have that. Some of them are normal, like, and I really like I guess the purple is the scheme that I selected for the browser, to where that's the hyperlink text, but they do this weird thing where they're like, I don't know if, and again, it might be an error that I'm seeing on my end, but a lot of them have like the white highlighted background that looks really jarring. A good example of that is when you go to Dragon Scourge and you see like all of these like gross white highlighted hyperlinks, which is nasty. But otherwise, I'm generally a big fan of dark mode. I do everything dark mode if I can, and hopefully we can be rolling with that. But obviously my players will be excited to see that. Hopefully, maybe they care, I don't know. But I am usually big thumbs up on it. And you can do it actually right like that. See? Junk, 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 junk. So we'll stick with it for now, and we'll see how it looks. Hey, Nathan and Surreal Dream. So I'm going to have a backup plan just in case they decide to stay in Bryn Shander. The biggest reason is you could get another long rest, but they don't need that. They haven't, I mean, they've long rested already last night, and they've not had any, as far as I'm aware, I don't think they've spent any spell slots or, you know, hit points or anything between then and now. So there's no reason to get another long rest here. Maybe if they had more skirmishes or something, but as I mentioned, I didn't have any desire to run any more Dwarger skirmishes. I think we've covered that pretty well. So they could still, if they wanted to, root out Dwarger and Bryn Shander, which they could do, but that would cost them time that they could go to, deal with Targos. I guess that's something I also have to prepare for, though. If they do want to stay and do stuff in Bryn Shander, but then go to Targos, then they would actually arrive in Targos later than what I anticipated. So unfortunately, I have to prepare 3 different scenarios. One of them is, so to back up a little bit, my plan is essentially once they leave the last thing they did, which was to solve the puzzle of Valishgaunt's location, which I need to just put that on the map too, don't I? Let's see, we'll do that now that I'm thinking about it. This like there, and we'll just copy and paste this one and say, what do we call it? Gaunt's dig site? Maybe that's what I'll just call it dig site. That's fine. I know, right there. Somewhere in the Dwarven Valley. Okay. So they've got that location, and actually I've already, I think, got it in their quest log because I put that in there under the main quest, which is just called Rime of the Frostmaiden. Yeah, and I put down the update from session 38, which was the last one. So, but they won't be doing that because they have to deal with the dragon first. So once they leave, they'll get the an update that they'll go meet with Speaker Shane, and she'll say that they've received word from well, they'll get word back from Tourmaline, which will basically say, hey, we've received the message, and thanks to your clearing out the mines and all that, we can now use the mines for hiding people as well as the nearby forest. And the dragon, we think, is coming our way, so we will start preparing for that now. Now, there is a delay of hours because that's how long it takes to, send a message to Bryn Shander. And then, so by the time the players are learning this information, the dragon will have basically already gotten to Tourmaline and destroyed all the homes, but they will have saved a lot of lives, which, is partly what I want to do in this chapter, is reflect the fact that, hey, all of these towns that you went to and helped them with some kind of crisis, you actually helped save lives, even though you didn't go there now while the dragon was destroying things. The previous actions you took made a difference, specifically in Goodmead, because I mentioned the tunnel they could take out of the meat hall. They will also eventually learn, probably not until after this chapter, that a lot of the people from Caer Denival and Caer Konig were able to hide out in the castle in Caer Denival because they cleared that out, and the dragon was instructed not to destroy the castle, and in the mines of Tourmaline. And so that'll be 3 examples of different people that they've saved a lot of lives with because of the actions they took, even though they weren't, they're like directly helping people necessarily right now. And then the other piece of information they'll have is they'll get one towards the end of that conversation. Somebody will arrive, and they've basically been sending out physical scouts to Targos, because Targos is not that far away. It's 3 miles, which I think is like an hour for most folks, maybe a little bit more, an hour if you've just huffing it or something, but it's not that far. So you can send scouts out there and just kind of report and see what's going on at Targos, and they'll get the report back saying that basically Targos, I want to kind of reflect the fact that Bryn Shander is like the nice city and how they're dealing with the crisis, and Targos is not. Bryn Shander is allowing in refugees, and they're trying to help people, and that does create a crisis because there's a ton of people now, and yes, the resources are going to be dwindling, and I'll actually have a little bit of a scene where there's like maybe a protest outside the town hall about people not wanting all these refugees in their town and all that. But generally the government of Bryn Shander is trying to do its best to help people, and Targos is the opposite of that. It's very much an autocracy with Nerth Maxildanar on top. It's run by the Zentarum, and they're in it for profits and not for helping people. So instead, they went basically what is it called? Martial law, where essentially everybody, shops are closed and the gates are closed. They've got curfew. Like, they've really shut things. And because the Zentarum have gotten forewarning even before they've heard spies maybe of the Dwarger operating, or for whatever reason, it does say in the Dragon Surge section that he's been able to get a heads up on what's been going on? Let's see. Network of spies throughout 10 towns alerted him to the dragon shortly after its attacks began. So he just straight up has spies in different cities that were able to give him a heads up, maybe even before Bryn Shander got the heads up from Edmund. So they've been able to stockpile and prepare for this coming event, and they've been like fully militarized. So that will be a stark contrast for the players when they go to Targos, and it'll just be all guard. And in fact, I'm going to have a scene set up. Hopefully the timing works out, because I think the best dramatic tension for me is if the players, when they get the update saying, hey, the dragon is at, I think, what did I write? I think I wrote down they're going to learn the dragon's at Bremen. Let's see. The dragon is already at Bremen, torching the town. Dozens of refugees are heading for Targos. The reports some tried to flee across the frozen mare, but were killed when the dragon torched the docks. Targos is fully mobilized. My scouts are to believe brought siege weapons to bear, which maybe that'll also be like the players are like, oh shit, we need to go to Targos because that's actually the best chance of defending. And then when they go to, so if they immediately leave to go to Targos, that's another hour, and I figure, okay, in that time, the dragon will then, by the time the players reach Targos, the dragon will be on its way, very near, basically maybe even within sight distance of Targos, and that will create this fun, dramatic moment of like, oh shit, we got to get in there and start and unleash this thing and get going if we want to, you know, protect as much of Targos as we can. So if that timing is correct, then when they arrive at Targos, they will have refugees from Bremen outside of Targos. And unlike Bryn Shander, where the sheriff comes out, welcomes people, and says, yes, come in, we'll take care of you, we've got tents, we've got things, Targos is like straight up, they've boarded up the gates, and they're like, fuck off, we don't want anybody, you know, nobody's coming in, we're under martial law right now, like it's not happening. So that'll be, you know, an extra event for the players to deal with. And I want to do this, but I don't want it to last too long. Like, I do want to get to the dragon fight as quickly as possible, so I'm hoping I can keep the pace moving and not have too many, you know, whatever things the players decide to do is probably going to end up, you know, working with little challenge in their way, just because I want to keep going. Like, for example, I also want to have, by the time they arrive, you know, they'll see the fact that these refugees can't get in, and then the I don't know if alarms will sound, but there'll be shouts and cries and things, and basically the dragon's been sighted, and all the guards will run over to the wall, and that means, how do the players get in the town? I don't know. That's up to them. They've got ways. So what they have to do is get in the town. Presumably, I guess they could run outside the walls if they wanted to. And what's interesting is their goal. They still have a goal of getting to the speaker, because that's the key. They need the speaker to unleash the artifact. They can't just, you know, run up near the dragon and unleash it themselves. That's the whole point. So that's going to be their initial challenge that I'm going to throw at them. And then hopefully as a cutscene, I can construct the dragon arriving, a bunch of Dwargar saboteurs basically destroying the siege weapons that they would be bringing to bear and essentially rendering them ineffective. What I don't want to do is have the players be like, oh, we need to go deal with those Dwargar. Like, that's not, you know, there's going to be 100, if not more. In fact, I think it says, let's see, what does it say under Targos? For militia, they have 200 soldiers and 16 veterans. That's a lot. That's a lot. So, you know, they'll just see countless soldiers, you know, up on the gates. They're armed with, you know, and a lot of them are militia, so they're armed with just whatever they've got, just spears and some light crossbows or something. The occasional actual, like, soldier. But they've got a lot of people, so ideally, even though the Dwargar are invisible and successfully sabotage the stuff, all those soldiers and militia can easily deal with the Dwargar. But the problem is, you know, the dragon is still bearing down on them. And I'm thinking it would be fun to have Maxildanar be the kind of leader who would absolutely cut and run and just try to save his own skin, because that seems pretty appropriate. Whereas the loyal captain would try to, you know, he's barking orders up there and basically trying to run the thing, but try to create a kind of a fun, almost chase situation where, like, you know, chaos erupts pretty quickly when the dragon appears. You know, people are trying to shoot and attack and do whatever, and then it's just, you know, blasts into a bunch of people. And it even says that it doesn't give a shit about the walls. Local militia swells. Let's see. The dragon ignores the town's walls for the most part and focuses on the buildings, leveling one after another. But I think if it was being attacked, it would at least, you know, laser blast a few people on the walls. And I think because it's still a lot of militia, I think they would break ranks pretty quick once this thing shows up and just like one laser blast just like takes out, you know, a chunk of wall, and, you know, and dozens of people die. That would, you know, these are not hardened soldiers. These are just people trying to defend their homes. So I think that would create mass chaos pretty quickly. And then I think at that moment, and so I want to try to create all this as a cutscene and not, unfortunately that's the balance I'm trying to create here, is leave the players feel like they've got enough things going on. So maybe I leave them to try to get into the town on their own or run around the walls if they want to. But then once they and then they'll see, the town is like eerily empty and all the stores are closed and militia and stuff are running towards the walls. And then once they get to the wall, then it would basically trigger this extended cutscene of all these events happening to where and maybe I'll give a clue to like, okay, and you see what might be the speaker up ahead, like, rushes down the tower as a bunch of people are coming out. And now you've got a little bit of a challenge where you need to find the speaker and chase him down and then convince him to do this thing. And I want them to do all those things, so I'm not going to make this a big complicated thing. Maybe there'll be some skill checks involved just for funsies. But I just want to create that fun, dramatic moment of you have to do this while this thing is, bearing down on you. And that could be the big thing, is maybe if you fail a skill challenge or something, we can say like a nearby, building collapses or somebody gets trampled or something. So you can actually soften the players up a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to have any fast rules about that. I may leave myself some notes about it, or maybe the players will do something smart where they'll surprise me and then we'll like cast web on everybody who's trying to flee and just stop that shit immediately. That's fine too. That's totally allowable. Yeah, skill challenge and a long verbal or comment encounter. Yeah, exactly. I think we're on the same wavelength with that. Because the point is trying to get to this fight as quickly as possible. And it won't take much to convince the speaker either, I think. They can explain pretty quickly, and we know Valrobin's got a silver tongue that he was proud to use in Bryn Shander, that you can pretty much convince this guy like, hey, this will make you, the shining hero, and you can do this and maybe not care about saving your whole town, but just in terms of what's in it for him. And that's really what you have to paint it as. He is just an asshole of a leader who's just a selfish narcissist. Where did I get that idea? That would appeal to his ego, essentially, to feed into the fact that you can be the hero here, or maybe it's like you gain this power or something. That's what you have to appeal, because he really doesn't give a shit about his town necessarily, but he does give a shit about his reputation, his power, standing, and all that, which I guess in a lot of ways is tied to the town. So once they do that, that will, and maybe they can decide. The thing is, it doesn't really matter where they do it, because I've got one battle map basically prepped, which is the one we saw on Monday, and that's because they don't get to determine like how the creature they summon ends up acting or anything like that. So it'll be kind of another. It's honestly gonna be a lot of cutscenes here in order to set this up properly. But it'll be oh, that's cool. It's all my purple. They will the speaker can unleash the avatar, which will turn into this giant, ice bird thing that will attack the dragon. That will be a cool little kaiju battle. Maybe the players want to do something to prepare, but the one interesting fact is, if they decide to remain in Bryn Shander, they can actually set up tactics a little more effectively that they would want, maybe, and I would be reticent to allowing the sheriff to give them those tips and stuff. Whereas if they go to Targos, they're not going to be time to do that, nor do they really have the pull. So they will show up, and it'll be pretty much chaos as the dragon starts attacking, and they'll, assuming all that can happen, they can unleash the speaker can unleash the thing, which does result in his death, which would be pretty satisfying. And then the avatar will essentially cripple the dragon. I still need to figure out if I need to figure out the details of this ice creature. Obviously, I'm not going to worry about a stat block necessarily, but I do need to nail down if this thing survives the fight, if Auril herself maybe takes control of it or does something. It does mention somewhere in it's a Dragon Surge that a storm starts. Remember where it mentions that. I think Auril starts a storm at where was that? A showdown? Takes damage, destroying the weather conditions. Shortly changes after it leaves Tourmaline at 6 target, for that's when a winter storm sweeps down from the right. I guess it doesn't mention that Auril's actually behind that. Storm hangs over 10 towns for 24 hours before petering out. Characters confront the dragon on Lonelywood, Bremen, Targos, or Brand Shannon must also contend with strong wind and heavy snowfall. And I think that should be, instead of that being just coincidence, which it sounds like it is here, I think that should be tied to them literally channeling this artifact. And then when the creature is summoned, I can either have it be maybe when it's destroyed, have this storm happen, or maybe when it's getting its ass kicked, or I mean, it still does damage to the dragon. Maybe that's when Auril actually steps up. Maybe its eyes turn blue. I don't know. I'll figure this all out. I like the idea of it using its frost, like a frost breath attack on the dragon. The dragon is not giving a shit because it's immune to frost because the Dwarger, they're very good at building things, and it's built to withstand that kind of conditions. So ironically, the strong wind and heavy precipitation is unfortunately only going to really affect the players and not the dragon, because they're the only ones with actual ranged attacks. And I don't think the perception stuff's going to matter. So essentially, it'll be disadvantage on range attacks, which is pretty bad for, unfortunately, really just Thimbleweed. But it keeps him, if he stays out of it, also keeps him out of level and presence range. So the idea is that will happen maybe at some point. And then I could choose to save this creature and still use it as the rock in Grim Scala. I guess, unfortunately, I need to refamiliarize myself with that Grim Scala area, which would be the only reason I would do this, because it'd be a fun callback, because that rock is in chapter 5 at the end of it. It's on the roof, I believe. It's kind of the boss fight. Oh, they also kind of can fight Auril here too. Go after the tests. It's been a long time since I looked at all this. This is going to be pretty far in advance from our campaign, because I've got things set up where they're not going to know about the Island of Solstice for a while longer. They've got a few more steps in the main quest. Where is? I guess it's not the end then. Entrance to the vault. Okay, it's the actual roof. G9. Oh, okay. That's a really cool. Looks like something out of He-Man. Like the Castle Grayskull. It's a skull in the mountain. By the way, I watched that Masters of the Universe on Netflix. It's okay. It's okay. The second half was better than the first half. The animation is really good, and the voice acting is ridiculous good. They have a lot of folks from like Game of Thrones as voice actors. They do some interesting stuff with the story. I don't know. They go really hard with all that stuff, I guess. But it's probably worth watching. I was never a huge fan of the He-Man cartoon anyway. I was more into Transformers and Ninja Turtles. He-Man was pretty far down the rung. Yeah. If Auril's home, so was her white rock Iskra. During the day, the rock sleeps in its nest. Shortly before midnight, the rock takes to the sky with the Frostmaiden on its back, which I'm eliminating all that because that's dumb. I don't like the idea that she has to get on a fucking bird and fly around to keep everything dark. Yeah, he does have a short sword. The one thing I need to do is get Thimbleweed a magic weapon, because he does not have any magic weapons, and the bad thing is, as a player, he does so much damage already. I haven't felt like he needs anything, because he's got, the Ranger favored foe, and I don't even think he uses Hunter's Mark, and then he's got his swarm bugs that all add little damage, and he does a lot of DPS without any assistance. But at this point, everybody else has a magic weapon. Like, everybody else has a magic weapon except for him. So I could either work around a short sword, which would be not that great for him, but he would use it, or give him a bow, or maybe a quiver, or obviously something along those lines, to where he can use something pretty reliably in combat. So he needs to be the next one that I give something to. I don't have any good ideas at the moment. So this could be an excuse that the reason I would keep this creature around is because, and maybe like Auril herself saves it or something, because then it would be a fun callback. The players actually summoned this powerful creature, and it's fighting, and then maybe when it would be, destroyed, Auril actually comes in and somehow saves it, even though not really the kind of saving type, but maybe just sees it as an extension of herself. maybe even possesses it for a little bit, like the eyes glow blue towards the end, and that's when it like rips out a wing, but the dragon like does significant damage to where the creature like maybe it'll just have it be flying away. Maybe it'll just fly away towards the northwest area, and then the players are like, well, and it does ground the dragon, so that's good, but maybe it doesn't actually get destroyed, and then that could be a fun callback for when they make it all the way to Grim Scala. They'll reach to the top and find that here is their frozen owl creature, which I basically I could probably just use the rock with maybe a... Boy, that looks really good with dark mode, I gotta say. Holy crap. I haven't actually seen what, like... pages. What does the character sheet look like? Oh, boy. It's red on black. That's interesting, but they make the descriptive text gray, so it's gray on black. That's gonna take some getting used to. Or if you can edit the color scheme. Oh, you can barely see the advantage toggle also, because that is the ones you're not selecting are black on black. Yikes! Interesting. That's really different. That's really different. It's like a different font too. Wow. Okay, I gotta stop doing that. I'm gonna go blind. Flipping it back and forth. This has been a review of Dark Mode on Roll20. This is crazy. I've been using Roll20 for so long. But I like the idea of using the rock and having that be on top of the thing. And you could even have it like, you know, maybe even messing with the players when they get to the Island of Solstice or something, to where they're like, oh shit, is that, you know, maybe have it like patrolling the area and like, oh man, is that the fucking creature we summoned? Does it recognize us or anything? And, you know, give it those extra, keep it the beefy rock. God, 250 hit points, holy shit. Keep that beefy stat block and maybe give it the extra, like, you know, Frostmaiden, Frost Breath or something. And then maybe you don't even have to fight the Frostmaiden in Grim Scala. You just fight this creature as a test, and then Auril reveals herself afterwards or something. So I think I like the idea of using it, and I think that's a fun callback. And the players don't know that, hey, this rock was always there. What I did instead was just bring it forward and let you guys summon it into the world, instead of you guys summoned the world and then I used it somewhere else. So kind of reverse engineered this creature. So I think that would be a fun idea. Even though that's going to be a while in the future, but I think that can be very rewarding for players, and I think they would remember it if this ends up being a big enough sequence, and they remember the fact that this thing flies off. Then that could be really fun to reuse it. So I think I'll make a note that the rock will survive its cutscene, and either on its own or maybe possessed by Auril will basically flee from the battle. It won't actually fight to the death like I was planning on having it do, but it will, essentially they'll both be crippled pretty badly from this fight. However, the rock, I keep calling it the rock, it's the, whatever I call it, the avatar, will be able to fly, whereas the dragon will be grounded. And the idea is, which as I discussed on Monday, is they will see the dragon kind of crash land, you know, just inside the town, and then by the time the players run to get there, assuming that's going to be their plan, because otherwise it would just rampage and destroy everything, because even though it can't fly, it's still very deadly, and in fact that's part of what it was going to do in Bryn Shander anyway. I don't know if it actually lands in Targos. It rarely actually lands, because it doesn't need to fucking rest. It doesn't say, it just says it takes 8 hours to reduce Targos to a smoldering ruin. But it does say in Bryn Shander it spends 6 hours strafing the town, remaining airborne, and then lands inside the walls and spends another 6 hours going from one smoldering ruin to the next. So ironically, it would just land on its own there. But this keeps it in the town, so it's still programmed to destroy, even though it can't fly anymore. And what I think would make it more interesting is if the players arrive and they already get a taste of its malevolent presence, which means you see a bunch of, you know, very brave and foolhardy militia and soldiers come up to it and attempt to, you know, attack it, thinking like, oh man, it's been, and maybe when it crash lands, it even looks like it's, you know, momentarily disabled or something, to where they think they can go up and destroy it. And then of course it raises up and immediately starts targeting it, I guess. And as we looked at its stat block, which I think Thank you for folks pointing out the fact that I was completely misreading it. Snap block last time. It will do its Malevolent Presence on one person each round, which a round is 6 seconds, and be annihilating them with its attack. So if we look at its multi-attack, it says the dragon uses its Malevolent Presence, which takes an action, but it still gets to use its multi-attack. It uses Malevolent Presence, and it then makes 3 attacks, 2 with its claws, 1 with its tail. If the dragon isn't flying, it can also make 1 attack with its wings. I missed that sentence, which means on its turn, if I'm looking at this correctly, this thing does 5 actions on its turn, which is fucking crazy. It uses Malevolent Presence and then makes 4 attacks. 2 claws, 1 tail, 1 wings. That is crazy pants. That's pretty crazy. Now, I'm almost concerned with the fact that I'm also giving it legendary actions on top of that, but I still think it's a good idea because it would be boring if everybody goes and then the dragon gets to do all of its things, which is pretty nasty, and then everybody goes. I just think legendary actions help break it up. What I could do is say, well, since I gave it legendary actions, maybe it can only do 3 attacks, or I could just say, fuck it, it's got 4 attacks, because as folks have pointed out, a big range attacks or whatever options they've got. So the fact that they've already solved that issue gives the players an advantage in theory. Now it is a CR 11. The players are level 6. This is probably the single hardest creature they have fought so far in the campaign, which is why it's such a cool, like, you know, Act 1 finisher, basically. And obviously it's smart enough where it would try to target the people it think it can target effectively with Malevolent Presence, which would be any, you know, powerful melee fighters. In fact, we looked at it, and most of the party are not good at Wisdom saves. Obviously, Freya and Celeste would be the best targets, because it can charm one person, DC 16 Wiz save, and they do get a chance to repeat at the end of each of their turns, but until then, they have to... The dragon mentally chooses, and then I think he only has to do it once, and then the victim has to move as close as it can to the target and use its action to make a melee attack against it. It doesn't necessarily get its multi-attack, I believe. That would be really bad if I ruled that, because when it attacks, it may take the extra attack action, but I think I would just rule 1 attack. Now, I could rule that you have to wait until the dragon's next turn to where it chooses a new target. I know, I agree, Nate, that legendary is the only thing baked. Legendary actions are the only thing in the rules that give DMs a chance. Layer actions and regional effects are things, too, that I don't think I've ever actually used before. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check the campaign, but I don't remember ever using layer actions before. But yes, legendary actions. And the interesting thing about legendary actions is you can also use that as an on-the-fly balancing tool. So often I will, you know, quote, forget, and sometimes I do legit forget, let's face it, but I will legitimately, like, not use all of its legendary actions in a round because I feel like the players aren't doing very well. Now, if that was the opposite and the players were kicking ass, then I'd be like, oh man, I'm definitely using these legendary actions as much as possible. But that's something you can kind of play with, whereas during its turn, it would feel kind of cheapening if you're like, well, it's not going to decide to use its wing attack this turn. Like, well, why? However, the weird thing is, the Radiant Breath almost becomes not worth it because it can use 5 attacks in a round, right? Like, you think the breath weapon is the best thing a dragon could do. You always, you know, roll the recharge every round to see if it can do it, and obviously if it's got it, it should do its breath weapon, and clearly it's the most powerful thing it can do. And yet, can it do more damage with 5 different attacks using a plus 11 each time? You almost have to imagine it's not going to do too many, because it has to choose. It either uses multi-attack, which lets it do all of its things, or it can use its Radiant Breath. I don't know what the number breakdown is, but it honestly feels... Now, obviously, if you can get a lot of people in the Radiant Breath, then that becomes more worth using. And clearly it'll be trying to do that. I didn't include Dwerger in this fight because I don't think the Dwerger would be anywhere. They'd know not to be anywhere near the dragon necessarily, even though the dragon, I'm sure, is programmed not to fight Dwerger, but it's got its, you know, laser blasts, and I give it this unique AoE, which I'm going to change to a cone, by the way, instead of a cube. And I'm just sick of fighting Dwerger, and I think the players are too. So instead, I think it makes it more interesting if we use a bunch of these militia, and I only included one veteran. The tricky thing about using them as minions, which they will be minions at first. In fact, I could even put a thing on their token saying they've been mind controlled. What would be a good one for that? Maybe the eyeball icon? The tricky thing is that means they could be cured of the mind control, which would suck for me. But most of them aren't really going to do much anyway. I mean, these guys have the Tribal Warrior stat block, which is not very impressive. They get 1 attack, they poke you with a spear, they have a +3, and they do an average of like 5 damage. I guess Pack Tactics give advantage. The Veteran is the dangerous one. The Veteran has multi-attack, has a number of hit points, a good armor class, and can really fuck up your day. So if they make the save, that becomes a lot easier for the players. And if we roll all the things out in the open and it's public information, so I just kind of have to roll with it, I think. Now, the advantage I have is the fact that they've got a +0 to wisdom, and it's a DC 16, so that is not very easy. But, as we pointed out, Valravn does get a chance to use the Counter Charm ability for the Bards, which probably doesn't come up too often in a campaign, and can run up and basically use that. I believe it's an action to do it, but then everybody around you has advantage on that roll, which makes a big difference. So, and that's something that the player could use to, show it off for sure. So, I'm debating on whether I need to add more minions to this fight. The dragon is already, I can describe it as being injured, but I've got this many hit points for it right now, which is 170. That's a lot of hit points. I think they've previously taken out creatures that were around 100. I believe Zardarok was originally 100. The Umber Hulk had about 90. Trying to think of what other boss fights of single target boss fights. Those are the two that come to mind that were near that strength. I don't think we've had any. So this one is significantly more powerful. I did up its hit points before. It was sitting at 147 for an average. I wanted to make it a little bit higher. And it'll be a thing where obviously I don't want to TPK the players here. So if they get it down to 40 and they're just on their last legs and somebody's hitting things, then maybe it'll die. I don't know. We can play around with that. Because I do want them to obviously win this fight. The other thing I can do is have more soldiers appear, which I'm just now realizing. I could actually have them get reinforcements, and maybe the other ones, you can just paint other people as arriving and shooting from afar, and maybe those people are smart enough, or they just don't want to get near it, because if you're not within, I believe the Malevolent Presence is only within 30 feet. It is within 30 feet. So if you stay without 30 feet, you can just shoot at the dragon and be perfectly fine. So that'll help add, and we can just kind of narrate that as, I'm not going to actually roll, damage and stuff for that. That'll just be off screen, but hopefully that'll help, holding the players a little bit. Say, sending shards of Chardalyn. Splintering out in a 15-foot cone. Let's change that. Those legendary action shakes its wings. Shards of Chardalyn. All creatures make a DC 16 dex save, taking 3d8 piercing damage. A failed save has one successful one. Additionally, each creature who fails a dex save must also make a DC 16 charisma saving throw or suffer a form of short-term madness. That's how I'm using the Chardalyn-ness of it all. So that's the only 2 legendary actions. I'm keeping it pretty simple for me, because it's, a lot of them are just like, you can make a perception check or something stupid. So in this case, it can make basically every round, it can do its big, crazy multi-attack thing, which, once people get free of the charm effect, that's at the end of their turn. So they just stand there like sitting ducks, and that actually helps the players, even though they might want to save people. That could definitely absorb an attack, because the dragon would probably use one of its attacks to just annihilate people all around it. It's also still trying to destroy buildings, so that gets interesting. Also, if it literally gets this radiant breath blast weapon back, radiant blast breath weapon back, it could also aim it specifically towards a building rather than players necessarily, and then that would help destroy the building, and then maybe that would create another rubble collapse. I'm probably just tempted to use 3d8 as like a baseline damage for that. Maybe I'll treat it like it's doing its you know, if somebody's near enough to that, but not in the range of the blast, you know, I could play around with the fact that this blast weapon is going to be tearing up buildings, and then anybody near that would have to make the same, essentially the same save as the Charlatan shard thing I've got set up. As I also need to put dynamic lighting in here, because right now we don't have any, so let's do that real quick. Paint some lines. The lines. This is a roof right here. Building. There we go. Don't want to forget to do this. Weird in dark mode. It's so dark. I did actually tint this map down. I left it on with global illumination. Move that guy if this is actually a roof. But it makes it dark for me. Can't tell if that's all. Let's block all this off. Okay, let's do that. Block that guy. I think I pointed out this map last time. I believe it's from village to pillage. Not, then it's wherever I said it was from on Monday stream. I apologize. I did point it out then. Remember now. That's good. There's a ladder right there. Looking. Jump up there. I was kind of wanting, you know, I want all the combatants to be here, but I could definitely spawn some more in down here. In other words, as the fight lasts longer. That. I'm gonna just block all this off down here. Can't see on the tops of roofs, but you can tell they're roofs. Roofs? Roofs is not a word that comes very often. It sounds weird. Roofs? Call them roofers, not roofers. Somebody is installing a roof. Not sure what this, I guess that's it right there. Some of these are like tarps or something that aren't roofs. That's a destroyed building. Should be nice. It might be good enough for dynamic lighting purposes. So just to test it, I think global illumination should be on. Yeah, in fact, you can see as soon as I put somebody on the map. So it's still pretty dark, but got dynamic lighting in place. I can go ahead and put the players on the map. Oh, why she's got that dark thing around. It's something to do with the dark vision I set up. Alright. Likely, Valravn and Edmund are in the back. Weed, Celeste, Bray. We can set it up like that. They come charging around and see the big dragon, and they're already going to be within 30 feet of it. You know, initiative matters a big deal with this fight. There won't be any surprise rounds. Although, I guess you could always argue the players, maybe they want to sneak up on it. I guess I could allow that. I don't know, can you sneak up on a construct? That seems weird. It only has a passive perception of 10. I mean, mechanically, you could. Just gotta beat its passive perception, and I wouldn't allow, I guess, a surprise round, even though it's technically, the creature itself is in combat, but the party is not. I would probably rule that it can't be just because it's a construct and not gonna be surprised, I would think. But hopefully we can get a sense of urgency anyway. Guy needs to be somewhere else, because right now, roof, which doesn't really work. I need to keep him within 30 feet, because that's how he gets. Yeah, that works over there. That in dynamic? Okay, perfect. We'll put you there. You can shoot down there. I can always add more people, and that would up my law of averages. What type of sight does it have? Good question. Dark vision up to 120 feet. Doesn't have like true sight or blind sight or anything like that. But 120 feet is pretty solid. It's just weird there's no condition immunity that's like you're immune to being surprised. You need the alert feat for that. Okay, the best feat in the game. I would probably... What I'd probably do is, if they wanted to stealth it, they would not get a surprise round, but maybe they would get advantage, would be the fair thing to do. I'd say, like, well, you can't really surprise this thing, it's a robot, essentially. It's not going to be, like, shocked or flat-footed or anything, but you can get advantage because it's not, like, actively, you know, able to defend against you or something. I could probably rule that. Yeah, he would definitely be nuking stuff. And that's probably what I was saying earlier about it when it's using its Radiant Blast. Even though that might not be the most efficient thing for it to do combat-wise, it's still programmed to use it as much as possible because it is programmed to destroy the town and not to kill this random party of people. Obviously, if it's attacked, it will defend itself and then try to engage them, but at the same time, it's still blasting all these different buildings, which means I probably need to put my rubble, have it ready on the GM layer. I can destroy these things as needed. Presumably the buildings around it would be the key. And we'll see, you know, if the players all get smart enough about spreading out and stuff, that would be the best thing for them to do. Then maybe the Radiant Breath weapon doesn't end up being that much trouble, but they'll have to contend with its monstrous amount of attacks and everything else. They're fully rested, fully healed. They've got potions they just bought. You know, it's going to be a tough fight, but this is also like the best circumstance you could possibly have for a boss fight for players, which is you're already in a town, so you're in a place where presumably it's, you know, you're not in the middle of a dungeon or something. You've got fully rested, you've got all your things, and you even have spent a lot of money on potions. And the minion, and this creature doesn't have any innate minions right now. The only thing it's got are minions that it currently has charmed, and they're every round these creatures get to make a save to shake off their charm effects, and once they do, they're permanently shaken off. So instead of minions, they become allies. And oh, you know what I realized too? They could also have their allies with them, couldn't they? They could have Goliath, a nuke. He needs to have an actual name on there. Nuke. Go. That the actual default token. Forgot about that. So that's a big deal too if they decide to go to Targos. Do they leave their allies behind or they take them with them? There we go. Should update his token. In which case I could allow one of the players to control him. If they want to, and he would be the only one that would be very much like, yeah, let's go fucking do this. They could force Spellux to come with them, which sounds like what they want to do. Spellux, I guess, could open the fight. And then Valen would be kind of a wild card, because I guess she would help defend. She knows that the players are the best chance she's got. She still has a vested interest in at least trying to solve this, you know, permanent darkness, and the players are their best chance of that. So they could have allies with them, which could also be a liability. Because the fun thing is they don't know about the malevolent presence, but they're wondering, wait, why are there, you know, a bunch of soldiers here already who have, you know, I could even show a cutscene where like they see one of the soldiers cutting down another one, and then as the players emerge, they just turn around with their weapons drawn and look at the players with hostility in their eyes, and basically really saying that they don't know how it happened, but the dragon clearly has a way of controlling people. He's got Crown of Madness, Chromatic Orb, and Shield once per day. Silent Image. Probably just have him sit back and Firebolt. They do decide to use him. Which doesn't say what level spellcaster he is, but I assume he's only got a 1d10 on his Firebolt. If they decide to use him. And then we could even drag Velen in there. So that'll be another possibility. Is that's a choice I'll have to remember to ask the players is, do you know, Kapunik is willing to go with you guys no matter what. The others might take a little bit of convincing. I think Velen would be pretty easy to convince. Spellex would be very difficult to convince. But if they wanted to have those allies with them, they certainly could. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much all the prep work I can do. So just a bunch of, you know, and even if the players decide to stay in Branchander, guess what? It's the same map. I'm using the same map no matter which town they're in, because those towns presumably look the same. And the effect will be the same, where it'll be the same setup with the, you know, guards and things. That's my secret, is that no matter which town they end up actually fighting in, that'll be the one. I'm hoping, I think the most satisfying one from the story point of view will be they get the update that, like, hey, it's in Bremen, it's going to head towards Targos soon, and the players will be like, okay, A, we know that we don't want Speaker Shane to die because of Unleashing the Avatar thing, we need another speaker. There's another speaker in Targos, and C, we can get ahead of it and possibly save more lives by just going to Targos immediately. So I'm hoping I can motivate them that way, and then that creates a bit more of a dramatic tension, because now they don't have to wait, you know, 8 or 9 hours for it to actually come to Bryn Shander. Instead, they could just go and meet it head on. That gives them a little bit less prep time, but they've already got, you know, they're already long rested anyway, and allows a little bit more exciting drama and events to unfold as we can hopefully get through this pretty epic battle with the dragon. And you can imagine that its hit points will be very variable depending on how things work out with the players. I should never underestimate the players, I will say that. Up here. And I might put them on the GM layer for now. All right, I think that will do it for this Thursday edition of Crafting Icewind Dale. If you enjoyed the content, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Thomas, Adam, Stan, Nathan, William, I'm Loud, Al, Kyle, Sclenia, Genocider, David, and Jammin' Clams. Gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, The Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, James, and Perry. Thank you all very much for your support. I'll see you all for D&D tomorrow night.